I'm definitely a 62 centimeter bike guy, right? I'm like really, really tall. So I need like a 62 centimeter bike, right?
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
No, wrong. Okay, so today's video is all about finding out what size bike is right for you. Okay, it's a really common question I get all the time. People ask me, what size bike should I ride? Hi, I am retired professional triathlete, CEO of Diamond Bikes, TJ Tollekson, and today is about determining the optimal size of bike for each person. Now, there's a lot that goes into it, and the most important thing that you need to determine is the type of bike that you're looking for, because the size of bike is going to depend on the type of bike. We don't all need the same type of bike, same size of bike if we're getting a triathlon bike, a road bike, a gravel bike, a hybrid bike, or a mountain bike, right? So we don't sell hybrid bikes here, but we sell all the other types of bikes here. We make them here. And it's really important that you get the right size bike, because there's nothing worse than being on a bike that's either too big or too small. So what is the right size bike? Well, the number one tip that I can give anybody looking for a bike is to go visit a professional bike fitter who uses a fit bike.
What the hell are you talking about?
So a fit bike is this really cool bike that doesn't actually look much like a bike. It might have tiny little wheels on it, but it has a lot of adjustments, so you can raise the seat, extend the front, raise the handlebars, right? So you can adjust everything. Some of them even let you adjust the crank arm lengths.
Crank that soul. Now I mean you. Crank that soul. Now
Fit bikes really help you determine what size bike you should be on by determining a few things. One, your saddle height. Two, your crank arms. Your handlebar position, stack and reach, or your pad stack and reach, okay? And again, stack and reach is a relatively easy concept to grasp. Oh, I didn't mean to stretch that out, but we did. But when I'm talking about stack and reach on a bike, the reach of the bike is the distance from the bottom bracket right here forward to where the center of the head tube is. So this distance is the reach of the bike, and the stack of the bike is the vertical distance from the center of the bottom bracket to the top of the head tube, right? So that's the stack of the actual bike. Now, you'll notice that the reach of the pads is not the same as the reach of the bike. So if we go from here all the way to here, you'll see the pads are in front of where this head tube is. So that's my pad reach, okay? Now my pad stack is the same thing. So I'm not stopping here. I've added 40 millimeters of spacers right here, and then I added 65 millimeters of spacers here. So my pad stack is actually quite a bit higher. These are all important things when you're sizing your bike, and so you need to know these things, and this is what a fit bike can help you do. Now, if you don't want to go see a bike fitter, you don't have one close, or you don't know one that you trust, then we can start with a few other methods to determine your right size of bike. And the first thing we're going to start with is your height. Now you can get a partner and do these measurements real easily, but take your shoes off, stand barefoot against a wall, stand up nice and tall like this, put something flat against your head, okay? So you want something that doesn't move up and down, so you don't want to come at an angle like this, but put something flat on your head, measure your height, not too complicated. You can do that, and then you want to measure your inseam. And when we measure our inseam, you're going to take something like a book like this, and you're going to stick it up nice and high in your crotch up against the wall until it's flat and makes a nice T. It's important that you get it nice and high up here, because I'm not looking for your inseam on your pants. I'm looking for your inseam like this. So you want to stand barefoot, get this up against here, put it flat against the wall so it's not at an angle. And then you're going to measure your inseam from the ground just like that. And the last measurement that you're going to do is going to be your arm length. Well, I'm going to have two more measurements. I lied.
You sit on a throne of lies.
So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to stand barefoot. You're going to go from the ground, and you're going to take a tape measure straight up here to your sternum. So where this little notch is right here under your throat. So you come down on your throat, find this notch, the very notch right there. That's where you want to find this because that'll help determine whether your torso is longer or your legs are longer in proportion. And then the last thing we want to measure is our arm length. And we want to measure from this little bump on top of your collarbone right here all the way down to the longest finger, right? So that's going to measure your arm length, right? And take those measurements. And with those measurements, anybody can kind of help you size a bike. But what's important is to know that just because you're 5'10" or 6'2" doesn't mean that any one bike is necessarily going to fit you better than another. Okay, so you could be 5'10" and have super long legs. You could have a 34-inch inseam, a really small torso, and arms that are crazy, crazy long, right? And so how do we size you on a bike? Most people will have 2 or more sizes of a bike that fit them. And it might not be the same through your whole life, right? So you may feel like at one point in your life, a 54 is the right bike for you. And that same manufacturer, same stack and height, all of a sudden, stack and reach could translate into you needing a 56 at some point in your life because you lose some flexibility, you can't get as low, or you don't want to ride as low. And so these are all important things in how you ride and what type of riding you're trying to do. Again, things that professional bike fitters can help you with. But if you just have some raw numbers, you want to use your height, and then you want to use your leg inseam, your actual measured inseam versus your measured torso length. Okay, so you want to see if you have a longer torso or longer legs. And it becomes really easy because you can compare these against all kinds of people on the internet to see which do I have relatively shorter legs or longer legs for a person of my height. Once we know these things, and then your arm length, we can actually determine a rough range of where our hands should rest. So if we're on a road bike or a tri-bike, where our hands should rest, where our pads should rest, okay? And once we have those figured out, we can size the bike, okay? The most important thing that I'm gonna stress here is that there's a lot of bad information out there. And probably one of the worst things you can do is use one of those calculators that uses both your height and your inseam to tell you what size bike you should ride. Okay, if we're talking about traditional size bikes that are sized like 52, 54, 56, 58, 60, it becomes really tricky to look at that as the size of your bike because most of those sizes are telling you the size of the seat tube. Jordan's here. Jordan, this is just the guy I was looking for to help do this stuff. So Jordan, come join us on this video real quick. Take some measurements for me, okay?
A few moments later.
World-class bike mechanic, Jordan Costello. So Jordan, I'm gonna take my shoes off.
Yeah, those are some high shoes.
Ooh, sick burn.
All right. So you got that? Okay, so we're going to take this measurement.
We gotta write the date up there.
Write the date up there. So
We know you're growing.
178 centimeters high. Okay, now we do this one. Step out from it. We're going to measure this. We're going to do this to me and Jordan, so we're going to compare the two of us, okay? And that is 77.5. Okay. So this is the most notable thing right here. So while Jordan is definitely taller than me, you can see he's about an inch taller than me right here. You can see how much higher he's almost 2 inches higher on his leg length than I am. So you can see like that's going to affect his bike height. So one more thing that I want you to measure here. I'm trying to come from the floor all the way here to this notch right here. So where my finger is right here, this is where I want to measure. What do you got there?
144.
144 centimeters. So from this bump here all the way to the end of my finger, that's where we're going to get my arm length.
You're at 77.
So that's TJ, and then Jordan. All right, so you are 78 and a half. So Jordan's 1.5 centimeters longer arms than I am. Oh, you gotta take your shoes off again for me. We gotta keep the control high here. Okay, so we're gonna be 147 and a half. 82. And then his height, 180.3. Sound about right?
Sounds about right.
So these are Jordan's measurements, and here you can see that while we are similar in height, you can see that there's some bigger gaps in some of these measurements, right? So just in his inseam, he's 4.5 centimeters taller on his legs, and it's not too hard. You can just look at the two of us and you can see how much longer his legs are than mine, right? And so his arms are longer too, but if you just compare the two of us, Jordan's arms look a lot longer than mine, just because that's Jordan. And so these are all important things that you have to consider. So when we're doing this, we're looking at your height, and then what we want to do is we want to take your inseam, so we take your height to your sternum, subtract your inseam out of that. So if I look at Jordan's at 147.5 and I subtract his 82 centimeter sternum, leaves me with 65.5 centimeters. And so, and then on mine, oops, I did that backwards.
Wrong.
So ironically, as that is, our torsos are about the same size. Jordan's biggest difference is his legs are longer. That's why he's taller than me. And his arm is slightly longer than mine as well. Jordan, what's the right size bike for you to ride?
It falls in between.
Yeah, it depends, right? Okay, and it depends a lot on how you want to ride and what you see the intended use of the bike being, right? And so somebody like Jordan, who's a good decade younger than I am, may want to ride a lot more aggressive than I do, right? And so he may want to be lower in the front end. So a high stack on a bike may actually inhibit his position on a bike, right? But at the same time, because he has long legs, which then means he's got a little bit shorter torso, but really only in relation to his height, that means we have to be aware of the reach on the bike being too long, especially if he's on a tri-bike, because that's really his torso length. He's compensating for that with his extra length in his arms when he's riding a road or a mountain bike, right? So he's bending over, but he's not resting on the pads like this. He's sticking his arms out like this, so that can help compensate like that. One of the things that I really hate is you'll see a lot of online calculators that tell you what size bike you need based on your height and your inseam. And you'll say, okay, if I'm 6 foot tall and I have a 32-inch inseam, it'll say, okay, you need a 56 bike. And then you'll say, well, what if I have a 34-inch inseam? And it says, well, then you need a 58 bike. And you say, wait, why? Why, if I have longer legs, do I need a bigger bike, right? Okay, and so traditional bikes, we're measuring the size of the bike off of this seat post right here. So the seat tube that runs all the way down here. So on a traditional bike, that seat tube on the bike is what's going to tell you a size, right? A 52, 54, 56. Having a longer one also typically means that the top tube on the bike becomes longer. So that was great when we used to make bikes that were really straight, but we don't do that anymore. So now sometimes you see things like effective top tube or effective seat tube. But again, the most important thing that I look for in the sizing of bike is the stack and the reach. And then I want to compare the stack and the reach to these measurements to see if they're a good fit for somebody. Okay, and a good fit doesn't mean one bike only, because just like Jordan said, Jordan, do you have bikes that are 54 centimeters?
It's mostly all right.
Okay, do you have bikes that are 56 centimeters? Yeah, why?
Just for each model, that's what works.
Right. Is everyone's 54 the same size?
It is not.
Not even close, right? Sometimes somebody's 56 is smaller than somebody's 54. So finding the right size becomes this big problem that we have to look for. It's actually why at Diamond on our triathlon bikes, we size them by Roman numerals 2, 3, 4, and 5, because we want people to not size it by a number or even small, medium, and large. We want people to size the bike off the stack and the reach on the frame geometry, use that to help determine their ideal frame size. So if a customer came to you, Jordan, and said, what size bike should I use? What's your best answer for them?
What their measurement is and what they're currently on.
Yeah.
Is a good start, but you do see a lot where people are on the wrong bike right now already.
Right. So that's a great point. So if you're riding a bike right now, whether it's too big or too small, if you just get on that, I can watch you on that, and you can also tell me what you dislike about your current bike. And I don't even need to actually see you do it. I can look a lot of times at just a picture of you riding your bike and determine whether your bike was too big or too small. But also how you feel about it is important, right? Some people naturally like smaller bikes. Some people naturally like larger bikes. It's not a right or wrong, okay? Because you're 54 and you're 56, we could put the exact same handlebar, stack and reach, right? We could get the exact same on the two bikes, right? Because they're close enough in size, we can manipulate using spacers and stem length to achieve the exact same fit on two different size bikes, okay? And so the other things that come into play there, like your fork rake and your wheelbase and your offset. So those are a little more complicated subjects, and they all have to do with handling of the bike. But in general, people will have a preference on, do you like the smaller bike? Which smaller bike handles how?
It's twitchier. faster.
Twitchier, right? Okay, so when the wheelbase is shorter and the wheels are closer together, the bike becomes twitchier. It moves a lot quicker that way. When we have a larger size bike, okay, the wheelbase becomes longer, the fork rake may be longer, then what happens? It becomes
Slower. Not slower, but like a Cadillac.
Yeah, so like a triathlon bike, it wants to stay in a straight line better, okay? So it depends on how you ride, the type of riding you do, and what you're looking for in your bike. So these are some basics of bike fitting, and I hope this helps you determine what your bike fit is. The most important thing I want you to remember is there is more than one size of bike that can work for you. A lot of it will come down to your preference and what you're used to riding. And then if we look at what you're riding right now, we can make a recommendation on what you're doing. Talk to a bike fitter, talk to a professional mechanic or professional fitter, somebody who sells bikes for a living, and they can help find the right size bike for you. Just remember, it's not one answer that's right.
Cut.
Did you learn anything?
Thank you very much.